Hello everyone, in this video, I would like to present my midterm examination assignment for the Legislative Theory course. This assignment discusses how we understand legislation by integrating both the original interpretation at the time the law was enacted and the contemporary interpretation that reflects present-day realities. As we know, lawmakers in the past could not fully predict the rapid developments that occur today, whether in terms of technology, social change, or evolving patterns of work. Therefore, in order to achieve a more relevant and meaningful understanding of the law, it is necessary to interpret legal provisions dynamically by combining historical intent with current legal facts. In this presentation, I will specifically discuss Act No. 1 of 1970 concerning occupational safety and analyze how this law can be understood more comprehensively when viewed from both its original context and its application in today's legal and social conditions. Law No. 1 of 1970 concerning occupational safety was enacted during a period when Indonesia was focusing on industrial development and economic growth. At that time, workplace safety issues were primarily related to physical risks found in factories, construction sites, and other industrial environments. The lawmakers were mainly concerned with preventing workplace accidents, injuries, and fatalities caused by machinery, hazardous materials, and unsafe working conditions. Law No. 1 of 1970 concerning occupational safety was enacted during a period when Indonesia was focusing on industrial development and economic growth. At that time, workplace safety issues were primarily related to physical risks found in factories, construction sites, and other industrial environments. The lawmakers were mainly concerned with preventing workplace accidents, injuries, and fatalities caused by machinery, hazardous materials, and unsafe working conditions. From a philosophical perspective, this law reflects the idea that the state has a responsibility to protect workers and ensure that economic progress does not come at the cost of human safety and dignity. This is closely related to the concept of the welfare state, where the government plays an active role in guaranteeing the well-being of its citizens. In this context, occupational safety is not merely a technical issue, but also a matter of human rights and social justice. From a juridical perspective, this law establishes a regulatory framework that outlines the obligations of employers, the rights and duties of workers, and the role of the government in supervising occupational safety. Employers are required to provide safe working conditions, ensure the availability of protective equipment, and take preventive measures to reduce risks in the workplace. Meanwhile, workers are expected to comply with safety procedures and use protective equipment properly. The law emphasizes prevention rather than punishment, aiming to minimize risks before accidents occur. However, when we examine the current situation, we can clearly see that the nature of work has changed significantly compared to the conditions in 1970. Today, we are living in an era of digital transformation, where work is no longer limited to physical workplaces. Many people now work remotely, use digital platforms, and are part of the gig economy. In addition, technological advancements such as automation and artificial intelligence have created new types of occupational risks that were not anticipated by the lawmakers at that time. For example, remote workers often face ergonomic problems due to improper work setups at home. They may also experience mental health issues such as stress, burnout, and work-life imbalance. Similarly, workers in digital platforms, such as ride-hailing drivers or freelance workers, often do not receive adequate legal protection because they are not classified as traditional employees. These conditions show that the original framework of the law may not fully address the complexity of modern work environments. This is where the importance of contemporary interpretation becomes evident. Through a dynamic and progressive approach, the meaning of occupational safety must be expanded beyond its original scope. Workplace safety should now include not only physical protection, but also psychological well-being, mental health, and even digital security. The concept of the workplace itself must be broadened to include remote environments and virtual spaces. In addition, occupational hazards should be understood in a more comprehensive way, including stress, fatigue, and other non-physical risks. From a sociological perspective, this situation highlights a gap between the law and the reality it seeks to regulate. While the law was designed to address industrial conditions in the past, today's labor environment is much more complex and dynamic. This gap creates challenges in implementation, as the existing legal provisions may not be sufficient to address new issues. For instance, there is still limited regulation on remote work safety, and mental health risks are not explicitly recognized within the legal framework. As a result, many workers today may not be fully protected. In practice, several legal challenges can be identified. First, some provisions of the law are considered outdated and do not reflect current technological developments. Second, enforcement mechanisms are still relatively weak, especially in informal sectors and emerging types of employment. Third, there is a lack of specific regulations addressing new forms of work, such as digital platforms and remote work systems. Fourth, overlapping regulations may create confusion and legal uncertainty for both employers and workers. From a theoretical perspective, these challenges can be analyzed through the lens of legal positivism, which tends to focus on written rules as they are formally enacted. However, this approach has limitations because it may not be flexible enough to respond to rapid social changes. Therefore, a more interpretative approach is needed, such as legal hermeneutics, which allows us to interpret legal norms in light of current conditions while still respecting their original intent. By using this approach, we can reinterpret the provisions of Law No. 1 of 1970 in a way that remains relevant today. For example, the obligation to ensure workplace safety can be interpreted to include mental health protection and ergonomic safety for remote workers. Similarly, the concept of workplace supervision can be extended to digital platforms and non-traditional work environments. This shows that even without changing the text of the law, its application can evolve through interpretation. Despite its limitations, this law remains highly relevant as a foundational legal instrument. It establishes the basic principles of occupational safety and serves as a reference for more specific regulations. It also reinforces the idea that worker protection is a fundamental responsibility of the state. However, its effectiveness depends on how it is interpreted and implemented in practice. Without a dynamic approach, the law risks becoming outdated and unable to address modern challenges. Therefore, to achieve a more comprehensive understanding, we must integrate both the original intent of the law and its contemporary application. The original intent focuses on protecting workers from physical risks in industrial settings, while the contemporary perspective expands this protection to include digital, psychological, and non-traditional forms of work. By combining these two perspectives, we can ensure that the law remains relevant, adaptive, and effective in addressing the complexities of modern labor conditions. In conclusion, Law No. 1 of 1970 concerning occupational safety should not be viewed as a static legal text, but as a living instrument that evolves alongside societal changes. Its core values, protection, safety, and human dignity, remain timeless. However, their implementation must continue to adapt to new realities. By integrating historical and contemporary interpretations, we can develop a deeper and more meaningful understanding of the law, ensuring that it continues to serve its purpose in protecting workers in today's rapidly changing world. Thank you for your attention.